Connect or die. Hello, Malcolm here. Welcome to Tuesday Teaching Tip number 404, and this is part 9 of our current series, Your Voice Matters. Tips for new and inexperienced speakers. Today's tip is connect or die, and it comes from a friend of mine, Anna Oliver. Thanks for sending this in, Anna. And she says this is her tip. Who is your audience? What is their age, culture, religious background? Aim, she says, to engage them by saying or doing at least one thing that they would be able to relate to. Our current society is no longer interested in listening to a 30-minute talk on a topic if there is no attempt by the speaker to engage them or to draw their attention. She says, I hope that helps. Yes, it really does, Anna. Thank you. Think about it. Have you ever sat through a talk that just didn't connect? Didn't your attention just die? Or worse, have you been the one speaking and seen people zone out, kind of die in front of you in terms of their attention? Those talks feel like they go on forever, whether you are the one listening or the one actually presenting them. So Anna's tip is very significant, and it's so significant that we're actually going to take several episodes to unpack the point, because there are different facets here to it. Today we'll explore just the one aspect of the topic, come back next week and the week after for the second and the third ones. Today we're going to focus on who are you speaking to. See, what helps us to ensure that we are connecting with our audience? The content and the style of your talk must be influenced by your audience. So let's explore two different contexts we might want to consider. Firstly, what happens when you're speaking to a congregation other than your own, or perhaps a non-congregational group of people that, again, you don't interact with very frequently? What do you do then in terms of how you allow the composition of your audience to affect how you'll say things and what you'll say to them? As an example, let me tell you this. So I've taught a thing called New Testament Survey, a module called New Testament Survey in several different contexts over the years. The students attending the UK and Ireland School of Missions in 2012 were a very different bunch from those who came to the AIM UK and Ireland New Testament Survey module in 2022, and the current one actually going on right now in 2025. Indeed, the people I will teach at the European School of Missions later this year in August, again, New Testament Survey, they're also going to be very different. How different? Significantly different, I think. For example, the European School of Missions students are relatively young compared to the other groups I've taught this topic to. They come from a very wide variety of European countries. They don't all have English as their first language. The AIM students were, on average, older Christians. The UK and Ireland School of Missions attendees were mostly from one country, from the UK, with a shared ecclesial history. So knowing these contextual facts means that I do well, and you would do well, in reviewing the material to see if it needs adjusting because of a different context before you teach it. Later this month, I'll be speaking in Cardiff to our sister congregation there, and then later in the month again in Ireland to people there. And in the months after that, I've been invited to preach in Edinburgh, in North London and Northwest London, as well as for a group of young professionals and students. Now think about it. I could take the same lesson to all of those locations. I might do, I might not do, probably not, but I could do. But if I did that, the lesson would have to be adjusted to the different contexts of those congregations. So what does that mean? Well, it means, firstly, reviewing what I already know about those congregations and any previous experience I have speaking there. I've spoken in Ireland a number of times. I've spoken in Edinburgh several times. I've never spoken in Cardiff before, so I need to approach those situations a little differently. Perhaps it also means contacting local people in those congregations, the leadership or people I already know, to ask them what they think are the current needs in that congregation. That way I'll be more accurate in what I share that meets their needs. Perhaps I might also like to look up news outlets online for what's happening locally. What are the big issues in Cardiff right now? What are the big news. What is the big news in Edinburgh? Consider then the Apostle Paul, who had an unexpected opportunity to speak to King Agrippa. In the book of Acts, we see this. Let's say they weren't exactly friends. The king was not part of Paul's congregation. However, Paul used something he did know about Agrippa in Acts chapter 26 and verse 27. Do you believe, King Agrippa, in the prophets? I know that you believe. Somehow he had this knowledge about Agrippa, and that helped him in his speech and shaped what he said in his attempt to convince Agrippa to become a Christian. So we use what we know and we investigate so that we know better how we can connect with the people we're going to be speaking to, especially if they're people not known to us or in a group we don't speak to regularly. Find out as much as you can in advance. So that's the first context, people we don't know or don't know very well. Secondly, what about when you're speaking to your own local congregation, the place you habitually worship amongst people you know and they know you well? So you might think that my earlier points don't really apply here. You could say that since you know the people you'll be speaking to, and you have done for some time, you don't need to think that much about the context. You know those people, that's all that you need to know, is that you know them. But those people are changing, and so are you. And thus, maybe you spoke a month or 2 months or a year ago to that congregation, but they're not the same group of people as they were then. Not only they are different, but perhaps the context of the world around us is different. Post-COVID is very different to pre-COVID. Post-invasion of Ukraine is very different to pre-invasion of Ukraine. Things change. And so we need to not be complacent about our understanding of our local group when we speak to them. Bear in mind, the Spirit of Christ has been working within them and among them, and we need to take that into account. So effective lesson preparation for the local congregation requires considering what's going on for the people you will be speaking to. So how do we do this? Well, here's some ideas. Firstly, try prayerfully bringing as many members of the congregation to mind as you can, and ask God to remind you or to reveal to you what is going on in their lives at the moment. For example, have they been recently bereaved? Are they struggling with their work situation? Do they have any physical illnesses? What have they shared with you in fellowship recently about what's going on in their lives, perhaps directly in their relationship with God or just around them? Where can you see God at work in their lives? What have they celebrated recently? One of our members recently received their masters. That's something to celebrate. These are significant things going on in their lives. And it's important to bring that to God and ask God to reveal to you what that means for your lesson this coming Sunday or whenever it is. Another thing you could do is to send messages. Send messages out to the members of the congregation, perhaps all the church, depending on the size of it, perhaps a select few people, asking them what they think the church needs at this moment in time, or what they feel they need. Now, how you do that will depend on the size of your congregation and the technology available and that you're comfortable with. Or you could even just ring people up and say, I'm thinking about preaching on this. What do you think? What do you feel like the church needs right now? What do you need? Those are some ideas you could try. So just to reflect on what we've been talking about today. So as you can see, preparing in such a way that you can connect with the congregation when you speak takes time. And it speaks to a tip I've shared previously, that we need to start our lesson preparation well in advance, preferably at least a month before we're due to deliver it, because that will help with the time pressure that we inevitably have. This prayerful research is time well spent. Not only will you have greater confidence that your lesson will help the people you are speaking to, but I think you'll also have a stronger sense of God at work, since He is the one guiding you towards the needs of the congregation or the group you'll be speaking to. Fundamentally, we need to remember this. Preaching and teaching are only partly about the practice of speaking. The other equally significant part of preaching and teaching is pastoral responsibility. There is no point bringing an irrelevant lesson to a congregation. We might feel satisfied we preach the word, but if we're not meeting the needs, at least to some measure, of what we know is needed, by the way that we preach and teach, we are being pastorally irresponsible and unhealthy shepherds. That's why this point is so significant, and I'm glad that Anna brought it up. Next week, we're going to explore a biblical example of how different audiences shape lessons. I think you might enjoy that. Come back for that in a week's time. Let me wrap up with a couple of questions here. So, from what we talked about today, how will you reshape your next lesson in the light of what we've discussed? How does connecting with your audience before you prepare your lesson help you to connect with your audience when you speak? Think about, pray over, and mull over those thoughts. If you could leave a comment or a question on anything I've shared today, I'd be grateful for it. So please do leave it where we can see that comment, because we learn from each other. We learn best when we're learning in community. By the way, do please consider joining me and other students for AIM UK and Ireland. Our current module is New Testament Survey, I mentioned earlier. You can find all the details on the website in the links below or on the screen. If you've got a question about the Bible, do send me an email. If you'd like my newsletter, then please sign up for that at my website, malcolmcox.org, and I'll send you a free copy of my book on spiritual disciplines. If you know anybody that might benefit from this, please pass the link on. I appreciate you spending this time with me and paying attention to what I have to share. Until the next time, keep calm and carry on teaching. Take care and God bless.